I'm refusing to let my ex-husband bring his new girlfriend to my father's funeral, and if you think that sentence sounds ridiculous, that's because it is. And not to mention, my father, his entire, last decade, he's been telling me how much he resents the man that I married. And I tried to tell him, I think that you are just misreading him, but turns out my father was spot on. So now he's trying to bring his new girlfriend to the funeral, and I won't have it. But half of my family is saying, hey, I think you're being ridiculous. This is his new significant other. What, is she supposed to just stay at home? Yeah, that's exactly what she's supposed to do. Guys, I have the full scoop with an update, and we're going to talk about it at the end of the story, so let's jump right into it. I've been thinking about making this post for 2 weeks now, trying to figure out if I'm the bad guy. If I overreacted, if grief is making me see things that are not there, or if my gut is right and what happened is exactly as messed up as it feels. I've talked to my therapist, I've talked to my cousin, I've stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m, more nights than I can count, and I still keep coming back here because I genuinely need outside perspective from people who don't know any of us. People who have no stake in protecting anyone's feelings. So, let me just start from the beginning, and I'm warning you now, this is long. I'm not good at keeping things short right now. My father just passed away, and my brain won't stop replaying everything in high definition, so bear with me. My name is Caroline, I'm 41. I was married to Greg for 16 years. We have a 13-year-old son together named Ethan. Greg and I divorced 2 years ago, and it was, in every way that matters, the right decision. I just want to be absolutely crystal clear on that up front, because I know how these posts can read, like the scorned ex who cannot move on, right? That's not what this is. I made peace with the end of my marriage, I've been in therapy, I've done the work. What I have not made peace with, apparently, is Greg's extraordinary ability to make every single situation on Earth about himself. See, when I met Greg, he was magnetic. I think that's the word that describes him best even now. Magnetic. You know, in the way that certain objects attract everything around them, not because they're warm or good, but just because of some invisible force they exert. He was confident, ambitious, funny, in that quick-wit way that makes you feel smart for keeping up. I was 25 when we got together, and I thought that certainly he had about himself was great. About the future, about what our life would look like was the most attractive thing I've ever encountered. It took years to understand that certainty was confidence. Oh no, it wasn't. It was just a complete inability to consider that he might be wrong. Over 16 years, Greg's self-assurance curdled into something else. Conversations became debates that he had to win. My opinions became things that he would correct gently, at first and publicly, then with a kind of patient condescension that made me feel stupid for having the opinion in the first place. He had this way of saying, well, actually, in front of other people that made my face burn every single time. He framed it as humor, and he laughed after. Other people would laugh too, and I'd sit there with this hollow feeling wondering when exactly I've become someone whose ideas needed to be managed in public. He never yelled, I want to be honest about that. He wasn't cruel in a way a stranger would recognize, he was just erosive, like water over a rock. Slow and constant, and by the time you look down, the shape of you is different and you don't entirely remember what you used to look like. My father, Thomas, was 68 years old when he passed away in February. He was a quiet man, not cold, warm, actually genuinely warm, but economical. He didn't waste words and he didn't waste energy on people he didn't trust. He was a mechanic for most of his working life and ran his own small shop in town where I grew up, and I knew everybody, was respected by everybody, and had absolutely zero patience for performance failure. He saw through Greg immediately. I don't mean that in some dramatic way, I mean it literally. My dad met Greg maybe 3 or 4 months into our relationship, and he was polite. My dad was always polite. But after Greg left the first dinner, my dad said to me quietly, "He talks about what he has." That was it. That was his entire review. I thought he was being unfair, so I defended Greg. I kept defending Greg for years. My dad never made it a fight. He didn't issue ultimatums or refuse to be in the same room. He came to the wedding, he came to holidays, and he showed up for Ethan's birthdays and school plays and all the things you show up for. But he and Greg never had a real relationship, and as the years went on, I understood more and more why. Greg treated my father's house like a stop on a tour. He would walk in, shake hands, make his rounds, compliment things in a way that always somehow circled back to a comparison that made our family look small. He talked about his income unprompted. He talked about the neighborhood we lived in versus the neighborhood he grew up in. He once, and I'll never forget this, and neither did my dad, told my father at the dinner table that he was thinking about buying a vacation property and that he could not imagine spending his whole life in one place. My dad just nodded and passed the bread. But the thing that my dad never forgave, and I only found out about after the divorce, was something Greg said to him 6 or 7 years into our marriage. My dad had apparently pulled Greg aside at some family gathering. I don't even know what prompted it, and said something gentle but direct about how he noticed I seemed quieter lately. Was everything okay? And Greg apparently put his hand on my father's shoulder. My dad described this detail specifically, the hand on the shoulder, and said, "You raised her well, Tom, but she needs somebody decisive to balance her out." My father told me about this 2 months after I filed for divorce. His voice was flat when he said it, and he said that I've thought about that sentence every year since he said it. Every single year. He never told me while I was married because he didn't want to push me towards, anything. He just sat with it. For years, he sat with it. They never reconciled, and Greg never tried, and when my dad got sick last fall, it started with what we thought was a respiratory infection that turned out to be something more complicated. A series of things that compounded over the winter. Greg sent one text. One. I saw it because Ethan showed me. Proud that his father had reached out, it said, "Hope he pulls through." That was it. No call, no visit. He didn't come to my dad's last birthday in October. He didn't come to any point during the illness, and he just sent 5 words and apparently considered his obligations fulfilled. Well, my father, he passed away. In February, on a Tuesday morning, I was there. My cousin was there, and Ethan had said goodbye the week before when we'd realized things were, turning. It was quiet, which I'm grateful for, and my dad was not a dramatic man, and he did not have a dramatic passing. He just went, the way he lived, without making a fuss. Ethan called his dad from the hospital parking lot, which broke my heart in about 11 different ways because my 13-year-old was the one making the call while I was still sitting inside filling out paperwork. I could hear Ethan's voice from where I was, not the words, just the tone. That particular pitch of a kid trying to hold it together while delivering bad news to a parent they don't want to burden. I could hear that, catch in it. Greg, by Ethan's account, sounded surprised, not devastated, not even shaken, really, just surprised. Like he'd expected Thomas to pull through and was recalculating. Ethan told me later that his father had said, "Wow, okay, I'm sorry, bud, that's tough," and that the call had lasted maybe 4 minutes. Ethan assumed his father would come. Kids do that. They fill in the blanks with the best version of the story, and he assumed Greg would just show up because that's what you do when someone's family member passes, and Ethan is still at the age where he believes his father does what you're supposed to do. Poor boy. Greg did not offer to come. I want to be precise about that. He did not offer. I'm the one who called him the following day, and I want you to understand that I did not have to do that. We're 2 years divorced. We communicate about Ethan, and we do it civilly, but we are not close. Not anymore. I wouldn't even say that we're friends. We do not make efforts for each other, and I called him because I knew it would matter to Ethan to have his father there, and because, even with everything, I was trying to do the right thing. I told Greg when the service was. I told him it would mean the world to Ethan if he came, and I told him I would understand if the drive was hard, but that we would love to see him, and I meant it. In that moment, freshly grieving, I genuinely meant all of it. I was extending an olive branch the size of a sequoia tree, and I did it freely, and he said he would come. And then, almost as an afterthought, the way you mentioned that you were bringing a dish to a potluck, he said, "I'll bring Madison." Oh, Madison. For those who don't know, and why would you? Madison is Greg's girlfriend. She's 29, and found out about her the way you find out about most things involving your ex-husband when you live 4 hours away and share a child through Instagram. After Ethan had already met her, after Greg had apparently integrated her into weekends with Ethan without once thinking to mention it to me or ask if that's okay, I'm not saying he needs my permission, okay? I'm saying a heads up would have been Human? Madison is, from everything I can observe, completely defined by her online presence. Let me break that down, just in case you don't understand. Her Instagram. Carefully curated performance of aspirational living. I don't say that with a particular malice. A lot of people live that way now, but I say it because it's relevant to everything that follows what I'm about to say. She is somebody for whom every experience is also a content opportunity. You know the type. She had never met me. She had never met my family once. She had never met my father. She had, as far as I know, never spent a single moment thinking about any of us. She is also, and I know how this sounds, completely irrelevant to the grief I was carrying. She did not know my father. She didn't know my marriage. She didn't know anything. She was just the person who Greg had decided should come to my father's funeral because she's, quote, part of his life. So, there was a pause when he said it. A long one. I could hear him on the other end of the line doing that thing that he always did when he was waiting to see how I would respond to a grenade he just rolled across the floor. Then he said in a tone, not aggressive, never aggressive with this man, just casually challenging, like he's already assuming the outcome and is giving you a chance to get there on your own. You're not upset, honey, are you? I said, don't call me honey ever again. And here's the thing, I've had 16 years of practice with that tone. I know exactly what it means. It means you should not be upset, and if you are, that's a problem for you, and we both know it. I told him calmly that I would prefer he comes alone. I told him it was my father's funeral, and that Thomas had never met Madison, that it wasn't about her specifically, but about the day and what it was for, who it was for. I kept my voice even. I had just lost my father not that long ago. So I kept my voice completely even because that's what 16 years of Greg will teach you, how to make your case without giving him anything to grab onto. So he gets defensive immediately. She's part of my life. That's what he said. He said it like I was asking him to deny her existence, and I said I wasn't asking him to deny anything. I was asking him for one day. I said there would be extended family there, people from Dad's life, people who had known me and Greg as a couple, and bringing his girlfriend to my father's funeral. A man who had actively disliked Greg, though I did not say that part was not appropriate. He said, "This is about your discomfort, isn't it?" There it is, that sentence. I've heard versions of it for 16 long years. The thing he does where your feelings become a problem instead of his behavior, where the issue isn't what he's doing, it's how you're perceiving what he's doing, and isn't that something you should work on? I wanted to say no. Greg, this is about the fact that my father never trusted you, never liked you, and spent the last years of his life quietly watching you diminish me. And the idea of you walking into his funeral with your 29-year-old Instagram girlfriend to perform grief in front of people who knew him is something that would have made my father furious if you were alive to see it. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say all of it, but I didn't. I just said, I'm asking for one day. Please. He pushed back a little more. He said something about not letting me control who we spent time with. I said I wasn't controlling anything about his life, just making a request about one specific event. Eventually, he said fine. He would come alone, the way someone says fine when they want you to know they're not actually fine. So Ethan, before the funeral, Ethan and I talked. I didn't bring it up to load him down with adult drama. I genuinely just wanted to check in and make sure he was okay. In the middle of that conversation, he told me unprompted that he was actually kind of relieved Madison wasn't going. He said it quietly, like he was confessing something he felt guilty about. He said that Madison and his father were always really affectionate in front of him, lots of public displays of affection, and it made him uncomfortable, and that he did not want to have to deal with that at Gramps' funeral, while also trying to be there for, me. My 13-year-old said that. He said he didn't want to have to manage it. I just hugged him. I told him he didn't have to manage anything he didn't want to. That his only job that day was to be sad, if he was sad, and to let people love him. But I thought about what he said for a long time after, because my kid has already done the math. He'd already mapped out how that day would go if Madison was there, and he didn't want any part of it. Not because he dislikes her per se, but because he understood instinctively that it would add a layer of performance to a day that should have been entirely without performance. My 13-year-old understood that, but his father did not. So Greg came, alone, as agreed. He was cold in that particular way of his where he's making sure you know the coldness is deliberate. No warmth, no real condolences, a brief hug that felt like a press conference handshake. He was present in body and entirely absent in everything else. I watched him during the wake. I couldn't help it. I know him too well not to watch him, and when he's in a room, he works in space. That's the only way I can describe it. He moved from cluster to cluster of family and old family friends the way he moves through every room, with that ease that looks like social grace but is actually just supreme comfort with being the center of attention. He told stories. I don't know what stories because I could not hear from where I was standing, but I could see the rhythm of it. The leaning in, the gesture, the small laughs from whoever he was willing to talk to. At one point, I drifted close enough to hear him telling my dad's oldest friend, a man named Ray, who'd known my father for 40 years, that he'd always had so much respect for Thomas. That Thomas was a real straight shooter, and that he was one of those guys you just don't see anymore. Ray nodded politely, and Ray also, I happen to know, was one of the people my father had vented to about Greg over the years. I know this because Ray told me so months before my father passed. He completely unprompted while we're standing in my dad's driveway. He didn't say it unkindly. He just said, "Your dad wasn't crazy about that guy, was he?" It wasn't a question. So I stood there and I watched Greg perform admiration for my father in front of somebody who knew it was a performance, and I felt something go very quiet inside me. Not anger exactly, more like confirmation of something I've been trying to talk myself out of. He left shortly after the service. No lingering, no offer to help with anything, no offer to take Ethan for the evening if I needed rest. He said goodbye to Ethan, said a brief informal goodbye to me, and was gone. So 2 days later, my cousin called me. She had been at the funeral, had seen Greg, and had done what small-town people do, which is talk to everybody and piece together a fuller picture than any one person has. She told me almost gently that Madison had been in town the day of the funeral, not at the funeral, in town. Greg had let her stay at a hotel and just left her there. He had driven 4 hours with his girlfriend and left her at a hotel while he attended my father's funeral. At first, I didn't know what to feel about that. Part of me thought, okay, at least he respected the boundary. But then my cousin told me the second part, which is that Greg had apparently told at least 2 people that day that she didn't know who exactly it had filtered through, but that Caroline had begged him not to bring Madison, that I had been very emotional about it, and that he had done it to keep the peace because I was still sensitive about everything. He had not respected the boundary, he just moved the performance outside the building. The story wasn't Greg made a thoughtful choice out of respect for the grieving family. The story was Greg is so evolved and gracious that he accommodated his unstable ex-wife's emotional fragility on what was already a hard day. Those are 2 completely different stories that he chose the second one. He chose it deliberately and he seeded it at my father's funeral. Madison posted on Instagram. I don't follow her, I never have, but Ethan does. Because Ethan is 13 and he follows his dad's girlfriend because what's he supposed to do? It's complicated and he's a kid and he's trying to navigate it the best he can. He showed me the post again. Not because he was trying to create drama, but because it had upset him and I am his mother and he tells me things. The post was vague. That particular kind of vague that is designed to be understood by anybody who knows the context while giving the poster total deniability to anyone who doesn't. It said something about how some people can't let go, accompanied by a location tag that was, I'm not making this up, the name of our town, the town where my father lived and passed away and where we had just buried him 12 days earlier. My son saw that post, my 13-year-old who had just lost his grandfather, who had stood at a graveside in February in a coat that was slightly too small because he had grown since last winter, who had cried quietly the whole drive home and then watched the television with me on the couch until 11 at night because neither of us wanted to be alone. He saw that post and he felt caught in the middle of something that he had no part of creating. Well, when Ethan mentioned it to Greg told him, "Your mother's still sensitive. Don't worry about it. Your mom's still sensitive." That's what he said to our grieving son about his grieving mother 2 weeks after her father passed away. So the question is, here's the thing I keep coming back to, the reason I'm still not sure. Did Greg, have some right to bring his girlfriend? Technically, probably, yeah. She's his partner, he's a free adult, I don't get to dictate who accompanies him to a public event. I know that. I've known that the whole time, and I made my request anyways because I decided that grief gave me the right to ask for one singular, uncomplicated day. But then I think about why I asked, and I know in my bones it wasn't jealousy. It wasn't that I want Greg back or that seeing him with someone else hurts, but because neither of us would know those things are true. I'm not in love with my ex-husband, okay? I haven't been for a long time, and maybe, if I'm honest, I wasn't by the end even when I thought I was. What I am is tired. I'm so tired of him. I'm tired of the performance of him, the way he fills a room with his version of events and leaves everyone else performing supportive roles without being asked. My father's funeral was not a venue. It was not a social event or a networking opportunity or a chance to debut a new relationship to a hometown crowd. It was the day we put Thomas Mercer in the ground, and Thomas Mercer spent the last decade of his life watching Greg shrink me down to a manageable size, and he went to his grave without ever getting an apology or an acknowledgement or even the basic respect of Greg showing up when he was sick. I think about my dad saying, "You raised her well, but she needs someone decisive." I think about my dad passing the bread. I think about my dad saying he trades up like cars, and that voice he had, that flat one, the one that meant he'd already made up his mind. I stood at my father's grave about a week after the service, just me, on a cold afternoon when the flower people had left, and the flowers were just starting to go bad. I said to him out loud, because grief makes you do things you would not otherwise do. I said you were right about him, and I felt something settle. Not resolution, not peace exactly, just a particular stillness that comes from finally fully admitting something you've been softening for years. Greg wasn't going to come to that funeral for Ethan. He wasn't going to come for me. He was going to come because funerals are exactly the kind of event where a person like Greg gets to be the best version of himself in front of an audience that knew him. And bringing Madison would have been the finishing touch on a performance that had nothing to do with my father and everything to do with his own reflection. And I asked him not to, and he almost didn't listen. And then when he did listen, he made sure to tell the story in a way that made me the problem. Same as always, same as it always has been. So, I guess I'm just asking the internet. Am I the a-hole for making that request? Because some days I think, no, I wasn't. I was protecting the integrity of a day that mattered and advocating for my son's comfort and honoring my father's memory. And other days I wonder if grief has made me small and petty, and if I turned a funeral into a power struggle that did not need to be one. I genuinely don't know. Tell me what you think. Guys, what an insane story. To even think that you should bring your new significant other to the funeral is ridiculous, especially when somebody asks you not to. Let's read an edit that was added to the end of the story by OP, because there were some questions being asked. It says, Edit 1. I want to add something because I've already had a few people ask in the comments, and I would just rather address it here. No. I do not regret calling Greg and inviting him in the first place. I would unfortunately do it again. Whatever Greg is and whatever he does, Ethan loves his father and wanted him there, and that mattered more to me than every other feeling I had about the situation. I called him for Ethan. That part I'm sure about. The rest of it I'm still working through. Edit 2. Someone asked how Ethan is doing. He's okay. He said in the way 13-year-old boys are sad, mostly quiet about it, occasionally not. He's been drawing a lot, which he does when he's processing things, and he drew a picture of my dad's dog, who passed away a couple years ago, and gave it to me last week without saying anything, just handed it to me and went back to his room. I'm hanging it in the kitchen. We're going to be okay. Guys, I want to talk about this story because it was weird. The comment section was very split. Some people were totally on OP's side, like, who would even want to bring your new significant other to your ex-wife's father's funeral? It's just strange. But there were a lot of people that were saying OP's reading too much into this. They think that she's really just jealous. They think that she's not over the breakup. They were just going in on her, and I need to know your perspective, from your side of view, from your advice, what exactly you would do if you found yourself in the shoes of OP, who was juggling being a mom, a grieving daughter, and just trying to put everything together for the funeral, and having to deal with her ex-husband bringing his new girlfriend. To me, it's absolutely ridiculous. So no, I do not think OP is the a-hole, but let me know your thoughts. Drop it down below, guys. I hope you enjoyed the story, and if you want more daily videos, consider subscribing to the channel. I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day, and of course, remember one thing: it's cool to be kind. Peace.